Good morning, everybody. We're on. Yes, we are. The Indy Combine is over. Thankfully, there were some standouts and some disappointments per usual, but does it really matter? More on that coming up. We are 1 week away from the period that we used to refer to as legal tampering in free agency. Starting a week from today at 12 noon, you can start to reach out to players and have conversations with players and agents. Free agency actually doesn't start until Wednesday, March 11th, a week from this coming. But I'm going to share some gut feel on two things that I am gaining confidence on that our team may do or may not do. That's coming up this hour. Ben Standig will join us at 12 in his normal spot back from Indianapolis. Steve Suter jumped on with me on Friday on my podcast to talk about Tyler Biadasz getting cut. And needless to say, he was surprised as well. He went back and looked at all of his film analysis from every game that he did this year. You'll hear what he said coming up this hour, maybe at 11 a.m. at the latest. So a consensus list of winners and losers comes out. All of these lists, you can turn them into a consensus, which I did for the last couple of years, which I'll share with you in a moment. But you'll see the Indy winners and the Indy Combine losers list. And a big winner, without question, was Sonny Styles. I mean, did you see some of the numbers that Sonny Styles put up? I mean, Sonny Styles went from maybe top 8 to 15, somewhere in that range, to perhaps going number 2 overall. The 6'4.5" linebacker, 240-pound linebacker from Ohio State, who played primarily off-ball linebacker. But Matt Patricia's scheme, a lot of things are, not necessarily indicative of what a player will play at the pro level or not. But Sonny Styles had a 43.5-inch vertical leap. That is the highest in 23 years at the Indy Combine for any off-ball linebacker. He ran the 40 in a blazing 4.45, and then his broad jump was like 11.5 feet. So this guy made a massive jump. But of course, Miami's defensive end, Reuben Bain, well, disappointing, very disappointing Indy Combine. Don't look at the tape. Look at the measurement of his arms. 30 5/8. That would be 30 7/8, would be the shortest for a first-round defensive end / edge in 27 years. Carnell Tate, the wide receiver. Remember, we were talking last week, if all of these defensive players are off the board, who would we take? I said Tate. He ran a very, very unimpressive 4.53. Yeah, well, watch the tape. It's not like he's a blazer, but in a football uniform, he's fast enough, and he catches everything with his hands, and he catches basically 90% of the contested balls thrown in his direction. He's really good as a route runner, too. All things that are important. So you'll get the big stories out of the Indy Combine, the winners and the losers from the Indy Combine. The receiver, did you read about the receiver from which receiver apparently just bombed every interview?
Mekhi Lemon, I think.
Yeah, Mekhi Lemon bombed every interview. Like they are talking about an all-time bombing of every interview. By the way, the fact that it's out must mean it's really bad. Really bad. Do we have any of the specifics other than apparently he got up in the middle of his meeting with the Jets and basically just walked out at one point?
I haven't really heard many details. I did see that his the presser that he had with reporters and stuff like that, he was moving all weird and just giving everybody a weird look the entire time. I think it threw a bunch of people off, and I guess he was doing similar in his meetings. I don't know. It's a very weird predicament that I haven't really
bizarre,
like
strange, disastrous. These are some of the words being used to describe USC wide receiver Mekhi Lemon's combine interviews. So, hey, these are the things, by the way, I've mentioned this before. I mean, in talking over the years to people who do this for a living, they say the part that you guys never know is how these interviews go. And that's actually the most important thing for us. It's our first face to face with these prospects. And, there is a gut feel that you get on what type of person you're getting. Are you getting a smart guy or are you getting a dumb guy? Are you getting a guy that loves football or a guy that hates football? Are you getting a competitor or are you getting, more of a flight guy in a fight or flight situation? What are you getting? Apparently he was, very aloof, cocky, avoided eye contact, was angry in some of these meetings. Look, it could be that he's just got some sort of, social anxiety issue. Maybe, if somebody breaks through and gets through to him, maybe he turns out to be great. His tape looked good from last year at USC. So I did something last night. I just went through the last few years of kind of a consensus Indy Combine winner and loser list, which of course is media. The results come from media descriptions, not team descriptions, but the media descriptions, the Kuipers and the all of the, draft guys, the Jeremiahs, the Bruglers, etc., and a lot of other stories. AI can do a lot of this for you now. But, last year, if you recall, there was a big defensive winner coming out of the combine and a big offensive winner. Look, I'm a big believer that you can't judge after 1 year a draft or even after 2. You really got to get to 3. But this is just so everybody has a sense of the biggest winner last year was defensive end, Texas A&M, Shamar Stewart. He had a 40-inch vertical. He had an 11-foot broad jump. Both of these were in the 97th percentile. He was 90th percentile when he ran a 4.59 40. He was listed between 280 and 290, but he showed up to the combine at 267, and people went nuts. So nuts that Cincinnati drafted Shamar Stewart at number 17 overall in the first round. I would not say that Shamar Stewart had a banner year by any stretch of the imagination. Far from it. 1 sack in 8 games. Last year's other big winner was wide receiver Texas, Matthew Golden. Do you remember the 40 time he ran last year? Whew, 4.29. One analyst wrote, boom, on Matthew Golden coming out of the Indy Combine. Look, both of these players may end up being great players, and Matthew Golden did finally, after an entire season of basically not playing anywhere near what Green Bay was hoping for from that position. He ended up having 29 total catches on the season in his rookie year. But he did play well in that playoff game against the Bears at Soldier Field. Had 4 catches, 84 yards, and a touchdown. It was by far and away the best game of the season for him. But those were the 2 big winners from last year's draft. You know who the biggest loser was? Now, there were several candidates, but Luther Burden Jr., I was the biggest Luther Burden guy out of Missouri. I wanted Washington to consider him late in the first round. And what was written about him was the measurement of his hands. 8.5-inch hands. Puts him in the bottom 5th percentile. Does it mean he's a bust? One person wrote, no, but it's a bad thing in general. Yes. Luther Burden really, I thought, came on at the end of the year. I think he's a star for the Chicago Bears. I mean, they've got some talent, don't they? The Bears. We really saw it at the end of the year. And that was, by the way, without Odunze, right? Odunze was hurt for pretty much a bunch of the games down the stretch. But between, DJ Moore and Odunze and the tight end they drafted, Loveland, and Luther Burden III, the Komet, remember Olamide Zaccheaus played well for them. They've got the 2 running backs in Swift and Monangai, who played so well in his rookie year at a Rutgers. But Luther Burden ended up in his rookie year having a pretty good season as a role player, but really came on at the end of the season. And I guess you could say that to a certain degree about Matthew Golden. But from 2024. Do you know on the quarterback list of winners and losers, the big winner, and again, I concede it's way too early to say anything about this because it's two seasons. But the big winner out of the Indy Combine, everybody agreed on it, J.J. McCarthy. Why? Because on the Michigan roster, the program weight was 202 during that final year. And people wondered, oh, my God, he's no quarterback under 205 pounds has ever fared well at the NFL level. But then he came in at the Combine weighing 219. Safe to say, one Indy Combine analyst wrote, franchises don't have to worry about that anymore with the very talented J.J. McCarthy. It's not over yet on McCarthy. Not suggesting it is. By the way, the loser of the quarterbacks in 2024 was Jaden Daniels because he didn't really work out. The best is this, the big winner from the 2023 Combine. So now we can go back 3 Combines ago. The big winner overall offensively, Anthony Richardson, quarterback, Florida. Richardson measured 6'4", 244 pounds, then proceeded to test in the 99th percentile. Ran the 40. Remember this? Fastest ever for a quarterback. Ran it in 4.43 with a 1.53 second 10-yard split. People were going nuts. And then Anthony Richardson, because this is so important for a quarterback, then he jumped vertically 40 and a half inches. And then because this is obviously so important for a quarterback, he broad jumped 10'9". The narrative surrounding Richardson is that he is a terrific athlete with ample space to grow as a passer. There was no simulated rush, but Richardson presented himself nicely during the throwing portion of the event as well. Combine that with one of the best athletic workouts at the position we've ever seen. Anthony Richardson, the big winner from the Indy Combine. The big loser in that particular year was Jordan Addison because he came in small and slight. I think Addison is a big-time receiver. 2022, the big winner, the big loser, Kyron Williams, because he posted a very slow 4.65 40, and his jumping metrics were in the 5th to 10th percentile, lowest. Kyron Williams has been one hell of a back. That's my only thing on the Indy Combine. I didn't watch any of it. I never do, really. The participation for this particular Indy Combine was very low. But it's a good television show because you get a lot of conversation about the NFL and NFL teams. And you have it signed up through Indianapolis through 2028. So I don't see it ending anytime soon, even though this was one of the worst turnouts in terms of players working out that they've ever had. There are a couple of Indy Combine, lists that I'll look at for players that I'm interested just to see if maybe they had a bad combine so they'd be, available a little bit later. Because, the underwear Olympics don't really do it for me. I know they do it for some of you. There's a receiver that Kuiper wrote about that I would love Washington to end up with. One of my favorite receivers in the draft is Zachariah Branch, who is a pure slot receiver at 5'8", 5'9", but he's very much like what I thought of Luther Burden coming out last year, and apparently he ran a 4.35 40. Where Carnell Tate, more of an outside receiver, ran a very slowish 40 times. So we'll see if that hurts him or not. Did you pay attention, Max, to any of the big Indy Combine results this weekend?
From the end of the week, I mean, the edge in the linebacker class, yes, I did see a lot of that, but I did not get to see a lot of the skill positions. I watched DBs and tight ends, and there were a few. Did you see Sonny Styles' brother ran a 4.28?
Yeah. So the parents must have been athletic, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah, I did see that. I think I saw that on social media. I didn't watch it for sure. Look, Sonny Styles, the tape is impressive. The tape's impressive for all of those Ohio State players. I mean, Arvell Reese didn't have the production, but you can see it in the play. You can see it in Sonny Styles. You can obviously see it in Caleb Downs, and you can see it, I think, very much so in Carnell Tate, regardless of his 40 time. I do wonder whether or not the combine results for Sonny Styles takes him off the board for Washington at 7. Things change between now and the end of April. This is the first real postseason wave of changes to, the mock draft boards. And then when you get into the pro workouts, the personal workouts, et cetera, you start to get people with true inside intel. You'll start to see those mocks change even more between now and the end of April. And you'll get a lot of the stories about, yes, unbelievable workout, but there are red flags because of this, this, and this. And then there are other players. My God, he is a Boy Scout, even though he didn't run as fast as he should have, but watch the tape because he plays plenty fast. So we'll see how the mocks, change. And I've already looked at some of them. But if you were a Sonny Styles guy, like Fred Smoot we had on last week, big Sonny Styles guy, but Sonny Styles may have just combined his way into the top 5. It happens. All right. There are 2 things that I've got a gut feel on. I wouldn't call it, super intel, but intel enough that I want to share with you related to our team. I'll do that when we come back. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. This from Manny E. Manny E. Sheehan, did the win over Philadelphia cost them Sonny Styles? I'm looking at the standings right now because I'm just refreshing my memory. The win over Philadelphia in the season finale definitely cost them at least a spot, and I think two. I think they'd be picking fifth had they lost to Philadelphia in the season finale. When it came down to schedule strength, that they would have had the lesser schedule strength than the Giants. That would have put them at least. I'm sorry. Okay, it would have been one spot. It would have been one spot. Instead of picking seventh, they would have picked sixth. No, my fault. They'd be picking fifth. They'd be picking fifth instead of seventh had they beaten Philadelphia. Wow. Yeah, you're right, Manny. That season-ending, division win in that tournament that we were playing in, that Quinn described, NFC East season-ending tournament. We had already been eliminated with our second-round loss because we beat the Giants and then lost to Philadelphia at home. So we were in the losers bracket, but we ended up winning the losers bracket because we beat Philadelphia in the season finale. Damn. Tanner McKee, I thought you were supposed to be better than that, especially against our defense. People in Philadelphia last year during the season when they were struggling offensively, there was Tanner McKee discussion. He looked terrible against us. I understood he didn't have starters with him except for Devontae Smith for that first series, but he looked terrible against Josh Johnson, and then our defense wasn't, I forget who played. Yeah, Manny, you're right. I don't know if it cost them Sonny Styles, but it cost them two spots in the draft standings. It did. Had forgotten about that. Did you guys see the story that Donovan Azaraku, the pass rusher from Boston College, I actually really liked him as a prospect. I loved the tape at BC. He, started to come on a little bit. He's hurt. Could be out for a while. The NFL news that comes out of the combine, I think, ends up being the most interesting stuff. Like in Minnesota, it looks like they're going to release both Aaron Jones, the running back, but also Javon Hargrave, who played for Durante Jones. And Hargrave, certainly is an older player. I don't know if they're going to want another older player. I mean, can you imagine if Trey Hendrickson and Javon Hargrave are their two big defensive line ads at 33 and 32 years old? Hendrickson's 32, right? I think so, because he was pretty sure he'll be 32 when the season starts. The thing about Hargrave that's interesting is, A, he played well. That's number one last year. And then B, Hargrave is, a true kind of 3-4 inside player. He can play either. He can play DN primarily, but he can play nose too if you need him to play nose at 6'2", 320 or whatever he is. I don't know. I can't imagine they're going to go old, but that is familiar. That is familiar. The other NFL news from over the weekend is the Chiefs cut, Juwan Taylor, the guy that probably lined up in the backfield illegal formation-wise more than any tackle in the NFL. How many times did you turn on the Chiefs and Juwan Taylor was either false starting or lining up in the backfield, not on the line of scrimmage? But the Chiefs are releasing him. And then the big question in Cincinnati is, what are they going to do? Are they just going to let Trey Hendrickson go? We'll know by today at 3 p.m. They could tag him again, or they could try to sign him to a long-term deal. I think he'll end up being available. All right. Now, so two just gut hunches on our team. And I don't think either one of them is that big of a deal or that big of a reveal. Number one is this. I think the chances of Debo coming back are slim and none. I think they are looking for something much different than Debo Samuel. They want another big-time outside receiver. That's what they're looking for. They're looking for, whether it's an X or a split end, they're looking for one of those two outside receivers, somebody to truly complement Terry McLaurin or be his equal. And I think that means that Debo is going to be allowed to go to free agency. Is it possible that Debo doesn't find the market very enticing and he comes back on a short-term, much less expensive deal? Yes, but I think right now the team has made up its mind to let Debo hit free agency. They're looking for something else. So that's number one. Number two is this. The team definitely, I feel confident about this. They want Jacob Martin back. I don't know if they'll let Jacob Martin hit the market. Jacob Martin played very well, and his tape was awesome from what, Steve Suter told us this the entire season. But the motor and the production and the competitiveness of Jacob Martin, people see him in some spots as a potential starter, worst case, a third guy in your edge rotation. I think the team wants Jacob Martin back. We'll see if that's one of the announcements we get this week, because I would imagine we got some news coming up. I mean, last week we had Andrew Wiley re-signed. We had Tyler Biotish released. This week we're going to get some news before free agency legal tampering begins a week from today. Remember, you can still sign your own. But those are the two guesses. Debo is going to hit free agency. And again, maybe, May, June, the price that Debo's looking for, he doesn't get it. He's got to settle for something less. And there is a fit here. But I don't think that's really their wide receiver target right now. They're looking for somebody who can be a true number two or a number one threat to Terry. That's what they're looking for. And that's not Debo Samuel. And then I think they like Jacob Martin a lot, and I think it's in their plans to try to bring Jacob Martin back. Now, would Jacob Martin be a starter? No. Is he going to get paid big money? No. There's a big difference between two players that Dan Quinn talked a lot about, and Dan Quinn talked about Trey Burks and Jacob Martin in particular with me a few weeks ago when I asked about some of the players that really stood out that maybe he didn't expect. And he said, off the street late in the year, Trey Burks, and he talked about Jacob Martin. You could tell that staff and that front office really likes that player. And they don't want him to go. He's a perfect fit for what they are doing culturally too, because he's such a badass competitor. But the other one, that I think is going to be interesting to watch is just Chris Paul. Because at this point, are they going to get a deal with him done now? Probably not, because, Chris Paul played well enough to create some real value when he hits the open market. And it's very possible they're going to lose Chris Paul. And if they lose Chris Paul, I'm guessing we can punch Brandon Coleman into his spot as a starter, especially if we think Allegretti is going to be the starting center, and I wouldn't say that that's definitive at this point. But Brandon Coleman is the left guard if Paul hits free agency and gets a lot more than Washington wants to give. And they know the player. But there's a market, I think, for Chris Paul when he hits free agency in a week. So you will end up having 2/5 of the offensive line. It's my guess. 2/5 of the offensive line be new, maybe not new players to the roster, but Coleman back in a starting position, but at guard, and maybe Nick Allegretti at center. We'll see. All right, speaking of Nick Allegretti at center and what happened last week with Tyler Biotish, Steve Suter, who did film breakdown for us all year long and was excellent, does not really follow the team, but did film breakdown from week 2, Green Bay, through the first Philly game. He was shocked, very surprised, and he went back and looked at all of his write-ups on Tyler Biotish throughout the year, and he shared them with me on Friday. You'll hear what he said next. You'll also hear whether or not he thinks Nick Allegretti can play center for this team. Steve Suter next. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. Steve Suter, part of Maryland's broadcast network for football games with Johnny Holiday, one of the greatest returners in NCAA history, is a punt returner for Maryland back in the early 2000s. Steve is a big film guy, and he did film for us all year long on our team. And all year long, he really looked at offensive line play, D-line play. There were a couple of players he loved, and I was curious as to what he thought about Tyler Biotish getting released, and here's what he said.
I'm stunned. I think it's got to be a cat play, in my opinion. It's not a performance play. I think he was one of the better linemen, the most consistent lineman all season for the team. And I went back, looked at my numbers to see if I was accurate at that, because that was my gut feeling. And I had him in the top performer, the Raiders game, Chargers game, Bears game, Seahawks game, Broncos game, Vikings game, and that first Philly game. That's a lot of games. He was only in the bottom for me score-wise the Lions game and the Dolphins game. He got handled in the Lions game. I remember us talking about that on the podcast. Those guys are big up front and they took it to him there. But other than that, then I even went back and I added every score for those main 5 linemen that the Commanders have, added that up, went to the total snap count, subtracted the first game that I didn't do, subtracted games they didn't play in. Anyway, I got a per play breakdown, and he is my highest graded lineman on a per play basis for the total of the season. It's very close, but he edges out Chris Paul and Tunsil. So if you want to put a label on it, he was their best lineman all season. So I don't think they're a better offensive line team for sure. You mentioned, you and I were texting, and I said, well, who played center last game? And you told me it was Allegretti. I said, oh my gosh. In my head, I said, no way. So I have quickly today just tried to run through the last Philadelphia game to watch Allegretti and see how he did at center. I'm only into the third quarter. It is a lot quicker, though, when I'm only watching one player. But he's not the answer at center. So they didn't make this move because they think Allegretti's better. There's no way they did that. He is a guard playing center, and it's evident. He's bigger, so maybe he's stronger, but in the same hand, he's less athletic. He doesn't have a prayer making plays in space. He can't get to the second level. When he gets to the second level, he's just going to get juked, and somebody's going to cut off him. He's probably never going to touch anybody on the second level under the double teams. So he's not the answer. They must have another trick up their sleeve, or they're just saving a little cap space there to make a move somewhere else. But all in all, you go into next season with Allegretti as a center, then you're not a better offensive line.
Could the reason be, by the way, and I've already talked about it in the open to the show, I think ultimately there was a third year left on Biotish's contract that was not guaranteed. My guess is, and it's only a guess, that, they went to him to try to restructure, that perhaps they wanted to keep him. But Biotish is, and his agent said, no, I'm going to play on the 3rd-year deal. You can either release me or I'll play on that 3rd-year deal and become a free agent next year. Because, whenever you get these players that are good players entering that last year of the contract, you are at risk at losing them next year in free agency, but typically you try to get something back for the player. If they're going to release the player, and it sounds like they will, the only thing they're getting back is some minimal salary cap savings. It's not super minimal. If they do a post June 1, it's like north of $8 million. But you're saying Allegretti's not the answer. I shared this with you that, they hired or promoted David Blau, who was the assistant quarterbacks coach to start the season, then became the quarterbacks coach when Tavita Pritchard took the Stanford job. He got elevated to OC over Cliff Kingsbury. We haven't talked since Kingsbury got let go. And there's the promise of many more under center snaps. Washington was dead last in under center snaps in the NFL this year, and much more of a marrying run game, probably a zone-based run game, to a play action pass game and play action bootleg game. Would that be factor in at all based on what you've watched Biotish do as a center? Do you think that they have less confidence that he'd be a better center in a new scheme?
No, actually, my gut says the opposite. If I have a zone blocking scheme, I want a center that's athletic. And now I can't speak to the intelligence of both of these players, and if we're comparing him to Allegretti and Biotic, I can't speak to that. I'm not in the rooms. I don't know what's going on from that standpoint of their intelligence level. But a zone blocking scheme requires a lot more coaching and much more of a cerebral offensive line, because you need to be on point with the guy that you're zone blocking with, whether it's on the right or the left. So you need a lot of reps with those players. The coaching has to be really well, and you have to be really well receiving the coaching. And then you're in more space, so you need to be more athletic. So Allegretti is bigger, but he's slower, he's oafier, he's not better than Biotic from a lateral standpoint of movement and agility. So I got to say, no, I don't think that's the answer or the reason why at all. Unless they got their eye on somebody in the draft, or they got their eye on somebody in free agency that they think is a better fit. I think this is strictly a cap play or a money-saving play, because it doesn't make sense from a personnel standpoint of putting a product on the field. Biotic is good. And I think you probably hit it right on the head. They probably tried to talk to him, and he said, no, I just put really good film on tape for 2025, and if you cut me, I'm going to hand that tape to 12 other teams, and somebody's going to give me a contract off of that film. So he probably did stand his ground, rightfully so. And that's where I would stand there.
Yeah, I mean, he was under contract, though, for one more year. So you could have just let him play out the last year of the contract.
It's an odd play, right?
Yeah,
that's odd.
You know, they re-signed Andrew Wiley. That's something that they've done here prior to free agency, which starts basically in 12 days.
Okay.
There is a lot of reporting, and they've even sort of admitted that they're actually going to keep Deron Payne on the last year of his deal. They're not going to extend it. He's going to count basically $28 million against the cap next year, but they're going to keep him. They're trying to extend Tunsil. There's no doubt about that, because he's got a year left on his deal, and he had an outstanding year at a premium position.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, all right. Well, I mean, I'm not sure that you could say more about the Biotic situation. The bottom line is you're very surprised.
I'm stunned. So, and another thing, maybe it's hard to tell because you can't watch it on film. You can't tell on all 22 what the accountability or responsibility for protection and calling protections is between center and quarterback.
Right.
Some teams rely mostly on the center to do it, and vice versa. So could it be a situation where Biotic was calling protections wrong and he had the majority or the bulk of the responsibility in doing so? That could be a thing. But I think you would see that more on film than we did. Protection breakdowns, when I was watching film, I don't think I could pinpoint it to the wrong calls majority. But so, yeah, I'm shocked. And I'm shocked they're keeping Payne. That's an easy $28 million I'd put in my pocket.
Yeah. And it would have been about a $17 to $18 million cap savings hit. I've talked a lot about your thoughts.
Stunning.
Yeah. On Payne. I think, I think there are a couple of things at work here with Deron. I think number one is that they don't have much defensively. They have a lot of holes to fill defensively. That's number one. Number two is his best season by far was his last season going into a contract year. That was his
I was thinking that.
Yeah, that was his standout year. Number three is if you can't trade him, and my sense is that they can't trade him, they're not going to get enough for him to try to deal him. Even a conditional third round, conditional day 3 pick, you'd probably get more back in a comp pick if he plays well this year, hits free agency in 2027, and signs elsewhere. You let him go, and then the compensation pick you get back may actually be more than, it would be more than nothing, and it might be more than what they can trade him for today. So those are the reasons that make sense to me. And by the way, the defensive coordinator they hired, here's something that there are a couple of things actually, now that I have you on the phone, I'll ask you about. But they went to a Brian Flores assistant coach, the Minnesota defensive coordinator. You were super impressed with the Minnesota
Mhm.
defense and Brian Flores. They hired Durante Jones to be the defensive coordinator, first-time defensive coordinator, but with Brian Flores. And one of the things that was interesting, even though they crowded the line of scrimmage and you weren't sure what they were in, their base defense is a 3-4, and they were in base defense more than any defense in the league last year. And to me, Duran's not a nose tackle. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
What? Why are you laughing?
I don't want him on my field. I just need better effort from a player of that caliber or what he should have been. So I'm chuckling because sometimes he does flash. I don't know. It's frustrating with him.
Yeah.
I hope you get the contract year play out of him. I'll say that.
Is he a better 3-4 defensive end? Is he better suited for that, or is he better as a 4-3 D tackle?
Yeah, I'm a 4-3 D tackle for him.
Okay. What
Towards
about
the end of the year, right? You guys were plugging everybody in at the end, trying to find somebody because everybody got hurt. He was horrible out there on the outside. So I don't want him rushing the passer from the outside because he can barely do it from the inside.
What about Kinlaw? 3-4 D end or 4-3 D tackle?
I like him as a 4-3 D tackle too, but I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't want to say you'd be wasting him there as a nose. He's good though. He's a player that I think is versatile enough that he'll make it work wherever you put him, and it comes down to effort and play style. And I think he could probably fit both.
But do you see him as zero technique nose tackle in a 3-4? You don't see him doing that, do you?
I don't. But where is he going to put him? I would like him more on the outside. He needs to be going up against guards, and I don't want to mess. I don't want him just stoning a center. Yeah, I don't like that.
You know, I went back and looked because you actually gave Eddie Goldman a good grade in a couple of games. And when they were in that 5-man front, he played on the nose, as a nose, more than anybody on defense, even though he played a lot fewer snaps defensively than everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And he's an unrestricted free agent, and I've kind of been keeping my eye on him to see if they re-sign him. And if they do, it's probably for that reason, because Johnny Newton isn't a nose tackle either, right?
Yeah. The problem is they haven't excelled anywhere.
No.
So it's tough to say you should be here, you should be there when I haven't seen you do well in any of those positions. I mean, maybe Newton could shine there because he hasn't shined, that's the 3 technique. And Goldman either. I mean, I know I had a couple good grades on me. He had a couple good flashy plays. Can he be more consistent? And I would agree he's a bigger body, so he may be more of that nose situation. So if they do sign him, you're probably right. It's for that purpose.
Yeah. Dorrance Armstrong got hurt in the Dallas game, missed the rest of the season. But he's a guy entering the last year of his deal. I mean, I would imagine they're not going to move on from Armstrong. No chance, right? Even coming off that
I
injury.
love them, but the injury is such an X factor. I've seen plenty of guys come back off of it and do well, and I've seen it end careers. So that one's just kind of a crapshoot. And you'd have to be dialed in with the medical team and watching his rehab. I would anyway if I was a GM looking to re-sign him. But as far as before he got hurt, one of your top players on defense. So if you can get that type of quality back, then heck yeah, bring him back.
So first time I've talked to you since Cliff Kingsbury parted ways with the team. They elevated David Blau, a guy that basically everybody identified the moment he retired from football and ended up on staffs, including the one here, that he was going to eventually be an offensive coordinator. And if Washington hadn't promoted him, he would be an OC somewhere in the league, probably Detroit, because Detroit was very interested in making him their next OC. The difference is that he comes from kind of the Shanahan, Kevin O'Connell, also the Ben Johnson scheme. But real quickly on Cliff, were you surprised to hear that they had parted ways with Cliff?
No, I wasn't. I didn't see much to. I just say I didn't give any second thought. No, when I heard about it, I said, yeah, that makes sense. Kind of just casually rolling off my shoulder there. I didn't think one way or the other, but I did think it makes. You could convince me. Yeah, that was the right move. I like what you're telling me about more under center play action. I think. Right, obviously, play action works better when you're under center, so I think that's going to help Jaden for that aspect of the game. RPO obviously works better out of the shotgun, but you can do less of that, and there's less risk, I think, in a play action versus RPO. So let's put him under center and add that to his game. I think that's a good play.
All right. What else? I know that I kind of put you to work a little bit this morning, but did you have anything else?
I don't really.
All right.
Gosh was my focus there. I'm, again, stunned about that. You're telling me the other roster moves. I'm not paying attention like you are. I can't believe they're going to keep paying. I don't want to beat the dead horse, but I think that's some money you can find somewhere. Who you think? We might talk before the draft, but I've been kind of paying attention to the mocks. I don't like doing that because it's just nobody knows what's going to happen. You got your eye on anybody?
Obviously I'm going to reach out to you to talk draft before, but I think that,
okay.
I like Bailey from Texas Tech a lot. I want an impactful pass rusher. I want somebody who can wreck a game. And to me, he looks like that kind of a player and was that player in college. I don't know if he's there at 7. I'm going to have you back on after you've gotten, sort of prepared for the draft. If you want to do it, and you can do it. I think the next thing for us is to see what they do in free agency and then have, from a film standpoint, maybe you break down some of their big free agent signings. Like, one of the things that, is going on right now is that they've got 29 of their own, unrestricted free agents. Now, it's less than that because, and they've got all these holes. They have the second fewest players under contract entering next year. So in addition to players on other rosters that are on the verge of becoming unrestricted free agents, Washington's got so many of their own, and they're going to re-sign some of their own. They got to fill out a roster of 90 players by the time they get to minicamp. And this is where there have been a lot of conversations, like Deebo Samuel, yes or no. He's going to probably command a contract somewhere in the $13 to $15 million a year range. Zach Ertz, he got injured late in the season. Bobby Wagner, some of the players that have been big contributors. Marcus Mariota is an unrestricted free agent. I think that's a no-brainer there. They may lose him because he may have an opportunity to compete for a starting job somewhere else. But, they've got a lot of their own guys. Jacob Martin, your favorite player. I think I can say that comfortably, that Jacob Martin was the biggest reveal for you and maybe all of us during the regular season. You loved him as a player. He's a free agent.
I did. Yeah, that's
Chris Paul too.
He played well. He played well in his country. Oh, Chris Paul is too. Oh, you got to get him back.
Yeah.
He was my second best lineman from a per play breakdown standpoint of the season. Tunsil was third. Tunsil got hurt by the Packers game. He had a bad game against the Packers game. If not for that game, he's probably my number 2 as well. But, yeah, you got to get Chris Paul back. The first players that you just mentioned, my gut said Mariota as well. He'd be, of the ones you said you might need to sign back, between Ertz, Wagner, and I forget who else you said, but Mariota would be my focus there as well.
Yeah, the question comes, they have so many needs on defense, but they also could use another explosive player or two offensively. And if you don't bring Deebo back, you're going to be obviously heavy into free agency looking for, if you don't bring Deebo and Ertz back, with coming off the, torn ACL, you've got to replace.
Has he vocalized that he wants to come back?
Yeah, he wants to play a 14th season. He has said that he thinks he'll be ready by week 1. But you certainly can't count on that. And we already know he's not an interested blocker.
Yeah, at all.
Yeah, but they've got there's some really good tight ends in the league in free agency. The Falcons
Okay.
the Falcons tagged Pitts, so he's off the board, but Isaiah
Yeah,
Likely is out there. You know
Oh,
who's
wow.
out there? You know who's out there?
Hmm?
Chig
Who?
Okonkwo.
Oh, yeah. Close to home. I'm a fan of Chig. Always was.
Me too.
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, I like. He's an athletic tight end.
Yeah, and he's not just a pass catching tight end. You know,
No. I like him.
And he hasn't played with a quarterback. He's had no quarterback in Tennessee.
Yeah, man, that would be that could be like one of those sneaky little signs. Doesn't have a great, stats like you said throughout his career, but you'd be like, where's this guy been all the time?
And I think
one of those sneaky signs.
I think they see Sinnott and Bates as, important players that can block and can be pass catchers in a, zone run based scheme with a lot of play action off of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know if you remember one of the podcasts. If I was Sinnott, I'd have spent all off season running routes.
Right.
Because I think I would build around him versus Bates. If I had to pick one, I think Sinnott's probably the better blocker. Now, I remember Bates he fell off late in the season for me, but I think you mentioned he was playing banged up, which that could have caused it. However, I think if you had to pick one, you're picking Sinnott. He should know that. So he needs to be running routes to try to become more valuable as a pass catcher. Otherwise, if you can go out and get one of those guys like Chig, and then Sinnott's your number two, and Ertz comes back, I would like that package.
Yeah. I think the number.
Man, you got a fun off season. I didn't know.
Oh yeah.
So many moves and rosters.
Yeah. Second fewest players under contract, and they had, arguably the worst defense in the league at the end of the year.
Yeah.
With so many holes.
What about Reeves? Is he under contract? You got to bring him back. I love that guy.
Reeves,
great catch in the secondary.
Yeah, Reeves is under contract.
Okay, good.
He's not on the list. I'm just scrolling through it to see. I think they're going to definitely try to re-sign Treylon Burks. I think they really liked what they saw for him, and they picked him up off the street. I think
I would agree. That's a cheap price. Yep, bring him back for sure.
You certainly think it is. But, yeah, I'm with you. To me, like, going into this offseason, I was like, the offensive line was solid. You want to keep it intact, so bring Paul back. But now they've got two openings, center, and they've got this position that Chris Paul. Now, Brandon Coleman is under contract, and they probably see him and maybe even Allegretti as alternatives if they can't get Chris Paul signed.
Yeah, so my gut says you're taking an L there if that happens. If Wiley's your starting guard or Allegretti's your starting guard, you're taking an L. Coleman would be my first choice out of those three, but still I'm taking Paul first at guard.
Yeah.
And he played well. He's got good film. I would imagine maybe that's why it's taking so long to sign him, because other people are talking to him.
There's no doubt. I think there's a market for Chris Paul for sure.
Yep.
All right. Thanks for doing this. I'll reach out to you when they start signing free agents. Appreciate it.
All right, brother. Yeah, man.
All right. That was Steve Suter late last week on my podcast. There is news related to Washington's offensive line. I will have that for you when we come back, and start thinking about this. We're a week away from legal tampering free agency. Give me the one player more than any other you want them to sign in free agency. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com. So there's some news this morning. Everybody's reporting it. I think Tom Pelissaro had it first. But Washington has agreed to a new deal with Nick Allegretti. Extends his current deal through 2027. The upcoming season was going to be the last year of his deal, and it helps lower his 2026 cap charge, which was $7.1 million. Now, Allegretti, I thought, might make sense as a cut along with Lattimore and Payne. They're keeping Payne. They're now keeping Allegretti because obviously they are moving on from Tyler Biotish. That was the big surprise last week. And Allegretti is either, a starting center, a starting guard, or a backup guard and center. That's basically what you have right now. And I say starting guard because it is possible if Chris Paul moves on, Brandon Coleman and Allegretti battle it out if they end up signing a center in free agency, a Connor McGovern as an example out of Buffalo. So Allegretti has been extended. And so he and Andrew Wiley are coming back among their free agents. And again, we're going to have, Allegretti was under contract. He was not a free agent, but there was a possibility of a release there, but not now. Their offensive line, it's going to be interesting to see if they make a move for center in free agency, if they make a move for guard in free agency, or if they think Nick Allegretti at center, Steve Suter, not a big fan, and Brandon Coleman at left guard, if they lose Chris Paul, are good enough. Look, they may sign Chris Paul and Brandon Coleman and Allegretti becomes the starter and Brandon Coleman becomes one of those swing tackle guards. Andrew Wiley as a backup as well. Got to have 8 of these guys, sometimes 9 or 10. So there you go. That's the news. Now, over the weekend, Jeremy Fowler from ESPN, along with some of the other ESPN guys, they put out their news and notes, things they're hearing. And Jeremy Fowler wrote the following about Washington. Expect Washington to target offensive help, among a lot of other things. When asking about the top tier of free agent running backs, tight ends, and linebackers, the Commanders come up a lot. Yeah, this is a deep running back class in particular. The running back free agent class includes a lot of players who can start. Now, in terms of stars, I guess that would be Breece Hall, but the Jets are expected to keep him. There's no Bijan Robinson in free agency, unless you view Kenneth Walker III, the Super Bowl MVP, that way. I don't. I certainly view Kenneth Walker III as a Pro Bowl level starter that just hasn't gotten enough snaps and carries because they've been a two-headed monster with Zach Charbonnet in Seattle the last couple of years. But Breece Hall would be probably the top running back free agent, but there's been a lot of talk that the Jets will keep him even if they end up tagging him. You've got Kenneth Walker III, the Super Bowl MVP. You've got Travis Etienne. You've got Tyler Algier. Big fan of Tyler Algier when he came out of BYU. Big fan of him now. I think he is a phenomenal starting running back in a lot of places, just not in Atlanta, where they've got Bijan Robinson. I think Rico Dowdle can be a starter for half the teams in the NFL. He's a free agent. I think Rachaad White can be a starting running back for, a third to maybe half of the teams in the NFL. He is on the market. Kenneth Gainwell, who is a great all-around versatile back. To me, he is a, more of a high-end kind of backup or alternative to your starting, 15, 18 carry a guy game. But I've always liked a lot Kenneth Gainwell. 2 veterans, it looks like will be available. We now know from reporting over the weekend that Aaron Jones is available. James Conner in Arizona might be made available as well. Free agents include Isaiah Pacheco in Kansas City. Najee Harris, never been a Harris guy. I don't think he's done it at the NFL level. And then you've got a lot of these guys like J.K. Dobbins is a free agent once again. Nick Chubb is a free agent once again. Look, I think Chubb, for the most part, didn't perform anywhere near what J.K. Dobbins did. He ended up playing a lot because Houston needed him with the injuries they had. Dobbins was outstanding until he got hurt, which has been his MO. But guys like Mostert, perfect zone run scheme guy. Kareem Hunt, Damian Pierce, Houston, a lot of backs available in free agency. I mean, a lot of backs. In terms of tight ends, we know that Pitts has been franchised, but Cade Otton in Tampa, Travis Kelce's not going anywhere. Isaiah Likely, talked about him. I certainly think he is an absolute starter, but I think Chig Okonkwo out of Tennessee, out of Maryland, played at Tennessee. I think he's a starter too. I think he's probably a better overall versatile tight end in terms of his ability to block. Njoku is available from Cleveland. You could have some cap casualties like Cole Kmet in Chicago, where Colston Loveland has taken over that spot. It'll be interesting to see what happens with guys like Jonnu Smith in Pittsburgh, TJ Hawkinson in Minnesota. A guy like Tyler Higbee is a free agent from L.A. Just going down the list of tight ends in terms of guys that Washington might, those are the tight ends. Fowler said, mentioned running backs, tight ends, and then linebackers in free agency, hearing a lot about. Of course, defense is really what I think they're going to be focused on overall. From an edge standpoint in free agency, that's, a little bit of an issue this year because Trey Hendrickson is the elite guy. Because I don't think Max Crosby is going to get dealt. It's possible he could get dealt, but probably not likely that he gets dealt. But in terms of edge stars in free agency, it's Trey Hendrickson. And then you've got, Mafe in Seattle. You've got Owe from the Chargers. You've got Jalen Phillips in Philadelphia. I would not put them at the Trey Hendrickson level, but they're younger. Trey Hendrickson's going to be 30. He's 31 when the season starts. He'll turn 32 during the season. Keep in mind, with his injuries last year, he didn't play a lot of snaps. He had the back injury, had the hip injury, so you got to be clear that he's going to be healthy. But he was a dominant pass rusher. Let's not, forget what Trey Hendrickson did in 2024. I mean, Trey Hendrickson was borderline the defensive player of the year in 2024. He was that good as a pass rusher. And he would certainly be the best pass rusher we've had here in decades if he landed here next year. There's going to be a market for Trey Hendrickson, a big market, I would think. But, guys like Mafe and Owe and Phillips probably come at a lower cost. They're in the 15 to 20 million a year range, I'm guessing. Whereas, Hendrickson's probably in the 30 million plus range. So, yeah, in terms of other pass rushers that are out there, Bradley Chubb is out there. Joey Bosa is out there. Khalil Mack, we're talking about older guys. Khalil Mack is out there. Kwity Paye is out there. Here's a guy that I've just always liked as a player, and he is still a young player. And I wonder how he would fit in a Durante Jones system. But A.J. Epineza from Buffalo, 27 years old, an Iowa linebacker, a real playmaker, during his career. Has had something like 6 or 7 career forced fumbles, has scored a touchdown, picked up fumbles, a real player sack-wise on that Buffalo defense. I think he's had a couple of years at 6 to 7 sacks. But he is, I think he's starter caliber for sure, among the edges. Who's the guy you want more than anybody else? We're a week away from starting to hear a lot of stuff and maybe even commitments that'll be made official on Wednesday of next week. Who's the one free agent you want more than any other? 301 230 0980. 301 230 0980. I'll give you my number one. I want yours. I'll get Max's as well. Ben Standig will join us at 12 noon. All right. Give me the one free agent you want Washington to sign. We are a week away from legal tampering, almost to the minute. And then on March 11th, that Wednesday at 4 p.m., it begins in earnest. So I'm just going to tell you there are a lot of players that I would be excited about, but I'm going to go with the players that I feel certain about, that I feel certain that if they sign them, they've gotten themselves a really good player. And I'm going to guess that the value will be legitimate too. I'm going to give you two. I want your number one. All right. My number one would be Juwan Jennings. I think this team has a chance to be, again, with their quarterback, a really good offensive football team. And I know what Juwan Jennings is, especially in the scheme they're moving towards, which is going to be more under center. It's going to be more run married to pass. Juwan Jennings is an outstanding number 2 receiver, and he's an absolute elite level wide receiver blocker. If you're going to be a strong running team, your receivers have to block. Terry blocks. How about Juwan Jennings as a blocker and then as a big-time clutch performing wide receiver? He's never been their number one because they've had true number ones. In some cases, he hasn't even been a number 2, but he has been a super valuable player. In looking through all of the defensive players, I have questions about all of them. Questions from my seat. Hopefully they won't have them from theirs. Like, I get it if they pay big money for Trey Hendrickson. I do. I understand that. I understand why they were interested last year before Cincinnati tagged him, because Cincinnati's asking price was too high. I do understand why a Trey Hendrickson might be a guy they go after. An Owe, a Mafu. All of those guys have, certain things that you would point at and say, man, I love that part of his game. And then they've got other areas where like, yeah, but not with Juwan Jennings. You know exactly what you're getting in Juwan Jennings. You're getting perhaps the best blocking wide receiver in the NFL. He's an absolute surefire starter. He's 28 years old. He catches, and not only does he catches in big spots over and over for a team where he's never been their number one. Last year on a team, that was having some issues, certainly with injuries, especially on defense, 55 catches, 643 yards, 9 touchdowns, a career high. The year before, 77 for 113 in a season in which they struggled. 6 touchdowns. I know with Juwan Jennings, I'm getting a guy that my general manager knows very well, that fits into the offense they're planning on going to, that is grade A character-wise, competitor-wise, etc., and is going to be a surefire help in multiple ways. That's where it's not that I think he could be the best player that they get in free agency. Okay, if they went out and signed Alec Pierce, I think Pierce is a better receiver. I absolutely think he is way up there in his ability to get downfield. Pierce can really scare a defense in some ways more than Terry can. So I'd be excited about that. But I know that with Juwan Jennings, if they don't get a Pierce, if he's my number 2, I got the best blocking. Jay Gruden once called Juwan Jennings the best blocking wide receiver in the history of the game that he's ever seen as a wide receiver blocker. There's a number 2 for me, and this is another thing that I think I know. Like, I know what I'm going to be getting with this player. And believe it or not, it's another offensive player. But I think a guy like Chig Okonkwo from Tennessee is on the verge of becoming a much bigger name in the NFL. He has played with the likes of Will Levis and Cam Ward in his rookie year, and he's played very well. I mean, he's put up in his last 3 years with no quarterback play, no offense, 54, 52, and 56 catches. He's a good blocker. I wouldn't say he's an elite blocker, but I think he's a good blocker. He is very good after the catch. Half of his catches were for first downs. I think Okonkwo is very underrated. 6'3", 240, is a very good route runner. As I mentioned, super strong in terms of after the catch. You know, when he was at Maryland, there were a lot of Vernon Davis comparisons. Not Vernon Davis, but in terms of his ability after the catch and to get open as a route runner, there were some similarities, just not the true home run threat over and over again. Those are two players that I feel like I really know. I'll tell you, Algier out of Atlanta, if they went running back, I'd love it. I was in love with him coming out of that draft from BYU. I thought that he was going to be an elite level back, and he got on a team with Bijan Robinson. So he couldn't be that, but I think he could be that. I think he absolutely could be a 1,500 yard a year rusher in the right offense where he's the guy. Tyler Algier is that talented. Can catch the football out of the backfield as well. But I'd go Jawan Jennings number one. I didn't give you one defensive player. I think there are a lot of question marks about a lot of defensive players in free agency. I'm not going to say that they're not going to, be active and that they're not going to be, desperate would be the wrong word, but they've got a lot of needs. They have major needs defensively. They've got to fill those needs. But I think that there are a couple of players on offense that are absolute. You know what you're going to get, and you're not going to be paying for Jennings. You're not paying Pierce money. For Okonkwo, you're not paying, if Pitts were available, Pitts money. And in the case of an Algier, you wouldn't be paying Breece Hall money or even Kenneth Walker III money. I need defense, but in terms of free agency, that's what I feel comfortable and super confident about in terms of the players that I've watched over and over again, like you guys have. There are some defensive players that I like a lot. And if they sign them, I'll be excited about an Owe if they sign him. Or a Mafu. Or certainly a Trey Hendrickson. Or a Devin Lloyd. But Jawan Jennings, I know what I'm getting. And I know what I'm going to try to be next year offensively. And he fits. Max, what about you? Give me your number one free agent wish.
So the number one right now, I mean, I look at the board and you definitely kind of hit a bunch of them. Jawan Jennings is one. Like, he does do a lot of things really well, especially the grittiest part of the game, like blocking and just mucking things up. But the guy I kind of really like on the offensive side of the ball, David Njoku, out of Cleveland.
Yeah.
He's been, the last couple of years he hasn't been the healthiest, but I mean, he can still supplement kind of that physical, go up and get it, contested catch type over the middle of the field that we're going to need in this David Blau offense, especially if, depending on, what Zach Ertz is going to be. So, or if he even is going to be anything for this team. So yeah, David Njoku would be somebody I kind of have towards the top of
the
my
only
list.
thing, and I like Njoku a lot.
Mm-hmm.
He is, he's going into his 10th season.
True.
And he's missed a lot of games because of injury. He's going to be 30 years old, even though this is going to be his 10th season. He's a true talent. There's no doubt about it. And when he's been healthy and there's been a quarterback, he's thrived. Like, he really, a few years ago when they had Flacco and they went to the playoffs in Cleveland, that was his best season. I bet if you had to be, because remember people were talking about, well, where's he been his entire career?
Yeah, 2023, 882 yards. Yeah.
81 catches, 882, 6 touchdowns with Flacco at quarterback that year when they went to the postseason. I love him. Big target, great hands, great after the catch, incredible athlete. Also, was I right? Yes, about to turn 30 years old. And 4, 8, 9, 10. This will be his 10th season. Yep. Good play. I mean, if they sign him, you feel like you've got a guy, if he can stay healthy, that is better than anything you've had, including Ertz as an overall player and an overall explosive player. So he'd be your number one.
Yep. Yeah. right as of right now on the offensive side of the ball, he's my number one guy.
All right, 301-230-0980, 301-230-0980. Your number one free agency wish for Washington is who? I mean, I'm playing it a little bit safe in that I know I'm not giving you Trey Hendrickson, or I'm not giving you Alec Pierce, or I'm not giving you, Kenneth Walker III. But I'm giving you a guy that I know fits and will be outstanding and will be available in Jennings. Let's go, Robert in Annapolis. We're going to get Robert to kick it off with one of his players. Go ahead.
All right. Well, good morning. One that you should want to get, but I don't want you to get him, is Tyler Linderbaum. Yeah. I think he's a really top-flight center. He's young. I mean, he's going to be expensive in terms of center, but not in terms of some of the other players that you may be pursuing.
He's going to get really maybe the biggest center contract we've ever seen.
I believe so. And, a lot of Derrick Henry's success, he runs between the tackles a lot, and that's because of Linderbaum. And he's also a very good pass blocker. He's just a really good player. I mean, he was a first-round draft pick, but, centers get that advantage. They get bracketed in with the guards, and the guards are getting good money. So it makes sense they would have certainly picked up his option year, but it was too expensive because of the structure. And a second one you might want to be interested in, and again, I don't want you to go after him, is the tight end Isaiah Likely. He's a really good player, good pass. He blocks and good pass catcher. So anyhow,
Linderbaum right now, I'm just looking at the projected, spot track. He's going to end up becoming the highest paid center in NFL history.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. But anyhow,
period, whether it's by Baltimore or somebody else. Thanks, Robert. Appreciate it. Let's go to Samaj. Samaj, your top wish list free agency signing starting next week would be who?
Hey, good morning, Coach. Thanks, Max, for taking my call as always. Yep. Hope you guys enjoyed your weekend. Hey, man, I'm sticking to my guns. I'm the Baltimore Violator because I flow up and down 295 between the two teams. Ike Likely.
Yeah.
I can't stress it enough. I just keep seeing that connection with Jaden and it just being wonderful. And I mean like Pro Bowl level, maybe even all pro level. I just can't get Ike Likely out of my mind. If the Costa is foolish enough, and I'm not going to say foolish because I'm sure it had a lot of Lamar's energy and thoughts into that decision to re-sign Big Mark Edwards. Not a brain fart, but Big Mark.
Yep.
Them deciding to bring him back and basically allow Likely to hit the market. Another team's discard could be another team's treasure, and I think he would be absolutely fantastic in the Bergen Gold. Thanks for taking my call as always. Yeah. Hail to the W.
I love Isaiah Likely as a route runner. He obviously hasn't.
And I like
the
other guys too. All the guys that have been mentioned so far, I'm good with.
Yeah.
But I'm just enamored with Isaiah Likely and his potential.
Yeah, I mean, he looks like he looks like a receiver at tight end. There's no doubt about it. 301-230-0980. We got a line open if you want to jump in. We start free agency a week from today. Who's the number one guy on your list that you want Washington to go out and get? JYD, go ahead.
I say stop all this stuff about talking about 31, 32, or whatever. Go out there and get yourself the guy Trey Hendrickson.
Oh, you're saying the age 31, 32. Got it.
I think he can. I think if you pay him and he takes care of his body, he's going to be out there until he's at least 35.
Yeah, that position, thanks JYD, as always, ages well, always has aged well. He's coming off, an injury in which it was hip and back related, so you got to make sure he's healthy. But maybe the fact that he didn't play more than 8 or 9 games this year is a big deal as well. But 2 years ago, this was a dude that was legitimately in the hunt for Defensive Player of the Year. Who was the Defensive Player of the Year 2 years ago? Was it? It wasn't Garrett 2 years ago, was it? Or was it the Broncos?
No, it was
corner?
2023. It was Myles Garrett.
2024, who was it?
Oh, 2024 was PS2, Pat Surtain.
Yeah, it was Sertan. Yeah. All right, 301-230-0980. If you're on hold, stay there. If you want to jump on, we've got an open line or two. Give me your number one free agent wish when we begin this process a week from today. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right. Happy Monday, everybody. We start off with the news out of Washington. They have reached a 2-year extension agreement with guard Nick Allegretti. Plus, the Texans, they have traded a 4th-round pick, a 7th-round pick, and offensive lineman Juice Scruggs in exchange for running back David Montgomery from the Lions. The Colts appear set to be tagging out wide receiver Alec Pierce, so another top wide receiver candidate comes off the market. And the Chiefs, they plan to release Jawan Taylor, saving $20 million in cap space. Tonight, we got the Wizards set to take on the Houston Rockets over on 106.7 The Fan. Pre-game coverage gets rolling at 6:45. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type in the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1. You can catch programs like Take Command throughout all offseason. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
Juwan Jennings. Give me him a week from today or a week from Wednesday. Perfect offense. They're familiar with the player. High level wide receiver as a blocker first, pass catcher second. Maybe on the verge of becoming even better as a pass catcher. That would be a really good get, in my opinion. I know that defense is everything, and I want a lot of new defensive players, but I think the call from my seat anyway on a lot of the defensive players is tougher. It's easy on Jennings. It's easy on Tyler Algier. It's easy on Chigakonkwo for me, offensively. Yeah, Kenneth Walker III would be great. I don't think they need to spend that kind of money on running back personally. Tyler Algier's next tier down, I'm guessing. Give me your number one wish list. David Njoku for Max, the tight end from Cleveland. He has played like a star tight end at various times in his career. Just got to be available. Let's go to Lap. Lap, who do you want?
I'm gonna say I wanted to say Kenneth Walker too, but yeah, I think Isaiah Likely, man. It definitely been special. I've been saying it for a while that we needed a younger tight end and somebody eventually to replace Zach Ertz. Unfortunately, he got hurt, but he definitely was a safety blanket. So I think if Jaden has that, because I think you need a tight end and a running back to really help him, so he won't be under pressure. He got something that he can really just go to right away. And I think Likely will be it, man. So that last caller that was talking about him as well is spot on. But thanks for taking my call, Kevin, man. Appreciate you, bro. Yep.
Lap, as always. Let's go to Aveen. Aveen, go ahead.
Hey, Kevin. I'm with you. I get that defense is going to be a big thing this offseason. But before defense, I think you need to check off one box. You can't go into next season having only 31-year-old Terry McLaurin as your only, proven pass catcher. You got to add one more proven dynamic pass catcher. And I think Jennings would fit the bill with that. But for me, I'm looking at Romeo Doubs. He's only 25. He's going into his age 26 season. So you're getting 5 to 6 years out of his prime. I think Jaden can elevate him to being a 1,000-yard receiver, a potential Pro Bowl caliber receiver. I think that's really good value. And he kind of fills the Zach Ertz role also of a polished route runner, separator, go-to guy on third downs in the red zone. So I think that makes a lot of sense for us. And I'll just also say, I think people are going to be disappointed in tight end. I think they're happy with what they have in tight end. I think the big source of agreement between Peters and Kingsbury was over Sennett. I think they really like Sennett. And I just have this feeling they're going to stay put at tight end.
All right. Look, there are options in free agency as we know at tight end, but maybe you're right. I think that the Dobbs thing, and I considered him as well. I think keep in mind the Brandon Ayuk thing is going to be a thing here when he does get released, because I don't think he's going to get traded. And that's going to be a very interesting development with him, how it sort of develops. Is Washington a suitor? Because can you imagine Ayuk, Jennings, and Terry? Because Ayuk's going to be a cheap incentivized deal. There's no way somebody's taking on that $27 million for next year. I don't see that happening, and I don't see Washington doing that. But that would be interesting. But I like Dobbs too. I do. I think he's a really good route runner, and I think he's a deep threat that scares people. So I think that there's some options. To me, it's like Pierce is in a category by himself at wide receiver in terms of free agency. I guess I should count Pickens, right? But Pickens has been tagged by the Cowboys, and we expect Pickens to play in Dallas. So Pierce would be the guy of the rest of them that I do think has some separation. But then you've got the group of Dobbs. You've got Christian Kirk. You've got Shaheed. Where's my wide receiver list? That's that next group. And Jennings. Jennings would be a part of that group. Oh, Mike Evans. But, I don't see Washington going after, 33-year-old Mike Evans at this point. I'd see him landing back in Tampa anyway. I think that would make the most sense. Eric in Norfolk. Eric, go ahead.
Hey, what's up, Kevin? So for me, I wouldn't necessarily say this is going to be like my number one, but one that I just can't stop thinking about that I would love to see on this roster. And I think you almost mentioned that he's one of the wide receivers, but Wan'Dale Robinson.
I like that.
And
I like him
big time.
Yeah.
He's got the short area, change of quickness.
No
great
doubt.
hands, a lot of yards after the catch. And, right there in the slot, and if we're not going to bring Debo back, I think having like a really good yards after the catch, super fast, elite acceleration kind of guy would be awesome.
I actually I went back and looked at some of the games that he played this past season. I had no idea. I knew he was effective. Wan'Dale Robinson, number 17 for the Giants, people, if you don't know and you can't remember. Think about the quarterbacks that he's been with over the last couple of years. And in the last 2 seasons, he's caught 92 balls last year and caught 93 in 2024. He went over 1,000 yards as a slot receiver this past season and was very effective. I totally agree with you. I also think there's an element of gadgetry that Debo had, not in the same way because they're 2 totally different players.
Two different, yeah.
Yeah, that you can use Wan'Dale. You can certainly use him, on fly sweeps. You can use him in lots of bubbles. I think he's an underrated player. Where is he on like a wide receiver free agency board? Let me just see if any the wide receiver, because I think he's a clear slot guy.
Right.
He is your third receiver and a really good one in almost any situation. So if you had a Jennings and a Wan'Dale Robinson with Terry, I love that. Love that.
Yeah, you're not done in the wide receiver market with Wan'Dale. That's the thing. You still need to get that.
That's right.
To match Terry, and I think Wan'Dale's. His biggest thing, I think, has been some health over the years. He gets dinged up a little bit here and there, but when you watch him, when he's healthy, he's awesome.
I think he's really underrated too. Let me just see the games played. 16 this year, 17, 15, 17, 16 in the last 3 years. His rookie year, he played 6 games. I don't know if that was because of him not being ready or not. Look, I mean, I'm sure you're like, well, what about Luke McCaffrey? What about, Treylon Burks? And what about him? I mean, you got to upgrade these positions. Trey Burks and Luke McCaffrey certainly would be on the team. Right now, Washington has 2 receivers, 2 under contract. Terry McLaurin, Luke McCaffrey. Actually, Jalen Lane's under contract, but punt returner more than anything else. Look, I don't know if they'd go out and sign a Jennings and a Wan'Dale Robinson, but both would be major upgrades over what they have right now. And that would be a really interesting combo to me offensively. And here we are. It's like everybody keeps calling in with offensive suggestions, and I think they need defense. But to me, in looking at the free agent list defensively and looking at each position, there are more knowns offensively than maybes. Defensively, there are some exciting maybes. Don't get me wrong. Let's get to Tony in Frederick. Tony, give me your number 1 wish list for free agency next week.
Isaac Shamalu, someone who really matters.
Guard.
You guys got one good player on your whole team, and you better do what you can to protect him.
Yeah, I mean, he's another older player at guard. I don't know if they're, he's been around in Pittsburgh for a while, right? I mean, how old is he?
He's 32, but guards and defensive linemen can play forever. It's a strength thing.
Yep.
And also, just got a question for you. Do you believe
listening.
your own eye? Do you believe your own eyes, or do you believe John J. Gruden? And do you really think that Jawan Jennings is a better blocking wide receiver than Hines Ward was? Have a good day, sir.
Yeah, Hines Ward was obviously an excellent blocking wide receiver. He would dig out a safety, as Jay used to like to say about Ryan Grant. I think Jay's talking about more so like in this past maybe decade or since say 2010, since he was, in the league as an offensive coordinator and head coach, because Hines Ward at that point was gone, right? I'm sure we could go back in history and find some really great blocking wide receivers. I think he's really talking more about his era of being Hines Ward's last year in Pittsburgh was 2011. God, he had a long career, didn't he? What a player, too. I think he's talking more about during his era of being an OC in Cincinnati and a head coach here in Washington. There are a couple of other players. The idea, and this sort of came off just Jeremy Fowler saying Washington's going to be interested in some offensive players in free agency, running back, tight end. Then he mentioned, in addition to that, he mentioned running inside or linebackers in particular. But on the tight end side, a guy like Cade Otton is a good option too as a pass catching tight end. Dallas Goedert is a free agent. FYI, if you didn't know that. A guy like Dawson Knox is a potential cap casualty. I mentioned Cole Kmet, TJ Hawkinson. We'll see what, Minnesota does with him. Look, Hawkinson, he was picked, in the top 15 of the draft in Detroit? He's actually a guy that is a big-time target and a big-time pass-catching tight end, and they just may not be able to afford him in Minnesota. But there are a lot of options, but it was interesting to hear a guy, Aveen said no tight ends in free agency. We'll see. Maybe they do believe in Sinnott. We'll see. Running back, to me, man, there are just a lot of them. So if you don't believe that the Bill Rodriguez, Jeremy McNichols room is good enough for you, there will be plenty of options and some good backs that don't go in wave number 1 that'll be available for much lower dollar amounts in wave number 2. How about that trade? Speaking of running backs, Max, David Montgomery gets traded to Houston. So no more 1-2 punch with Gibbs and Montgomery in Detroit. Look, Montgomery's been a very good back. He just isn't Gibbs. But he's had some very good games. He's been a good back. He was a very good back in Chicago when he came out of Kansas State. David Montgomery, Iowa State, Kansas State, one of those two. Iowa State back in 2019. He's a good back, and they gave up a 4th, a 7th, and a player for him, right?
Yeah, they gave up Juice Scruggs, the offensive lineman.
That has to mean that Mixon's days are done.
You would think. That seems to be most of the talk coming out of Houston right now is that Joe Mixon's future appears to be set. So I think that's probably coming down the track.
So they'll have the rookie from USC as the other back that played all year long.
Woody Marks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So he ends up being that guy. And, I did read something over the weekend that Houston laughed at some question that got posed to somebody during, I guess it was the GM last week in Indy about whether or not CJ Stroud would get moved in this offseason. Like, that's crazy. Like, I understand the game he had against the Patriots. The coach kind of put him into that position, all due respect. They had all those injuries. There was no Nico Collins. Then they lost the tight end, Dalton Schultz in the first half, and they put him in harm's way. But C.J. Stroud is a top half of the league NFL starter. If you don't have an obvious replacement for Stroud, I know there's some belief in Davis Mills, but you're not going away from Stroud on a rookie deal, right? They picked up his 5th-year option, or did they already sign him to a long-term deal? I forget. Well, they had to pick up they have until May 1st to pick up the option. That's what it is. He's in heading into the final year of his rookie deal. So they've got until May 1st to pick up the 5th-year option. They'd be insane not to. Ben Standig next. That music means that Ben Standig is with us. He joins us every Monday and Friday, sometimes in between if we need him. He is our Washington Commanders team insider. He writes for Substack, a column called Last Man Standing. I'm a subscriber. I would urge you to be the same. You can subscribe to it by going to his X account at Ben Standing. He's back from the Indy Combine. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, you were back from the Indy Combine when we talked to you on Friday. But I'm just reading in between the break here your column for today. The Commanders remain the NFL's mystery box, even at the Combine. It is true, right, that Washington has become a real buttoned-up operation. Like, there's not a lot of leaking of intel out there from them compared to other teams, or certainly compared to what they used to be.
Yeah, no, the lead quote in the story is from an agent who said that to me that at the Combine that they are extremely buttoned up is the quote. So yes, you're spot on there. You know, even if you look at various, national insiders or the bigger outlets, do their sort of Combine recap or just trade rumors or whatever. Anytime Washington is mentioned, it's always sort of mentioned like you're sort of like talking around them, like they're mentioned, but it's not. You can tell it's not coming from them. It's like, hey, it's like when Ian Rappaport the other day said he's expecting fireworks, but he didn't say like, well, according to sources, he's expecting fireworks. Yeah. He's just looking at the cap space and assuming, which we all do as well. Yeah, so they are very tight in that way, which is, obviously it's challenging for us. But yeah, hey, I mean, it's on the bigger picture scale, you'd rather have that than everybody putting out everything that anybody says in that building at all times like it was before.
Yeah, I think I don't want to get too into the weeds here, but I think if there's one thing that, maybe there has been some occasional intel on is when they don't like the narrative that's out there about something, controversial, I would say, like the Terry summer of last summer. But in terms of like who they're going to pursue in free agency, who they're going to draft, what was said in an interview with a prospect in Indianapolis per Washington, we're not getting any of that stuff from them. None of it.
No. I mean, like, did we know that they were going to take Jaden Daniels in the end? I mean, it certainly felt like that way. There was a lot of smoke, but like, it was, that one was almost like too big to hide, It was too big to not kind of get out there to sense that. But yeah, no, look, I mean, this is like the deal. And, you may ask me about Laramie Tunsil, what's going on with that? That's the biggest, piece of business that we know that's going to need to take place. I honestly can't tell you too much more about that than where we were last time, other than just as both Peters and Quinn said, hey, I like the guy, hope we get something done. But where we are with that, you would assume that they would like to get this done before free agency starts, which is essentially next Monday. So it's not, they don't have to get it done by then, but you would like to know what your costs are. And, maybe they can lower his cap number this year to get even more space. So there's a little bit of a deadline here on that one.
All right, let's just start with the news of today. Adding a year, right? 1 year to Allegretti's deal to lower the cap number for this year. Not a surprise after we learned last week that Tyler Biadasz was going to get released. But do you think that this is a clear-cut sign that Allegretti's the front runner to be the starting center next year?
I think this is a clear-cut sign that they've given themselves options so that they don't go into free agency or perhaps the draft thinking we have to get a center or even we have to get a left guard, right? They have now, at least between Allegretti, who can play center or guard, Andrew Wiley, who can play guard and tackle, and Brandon Coleman, who was, of course, the starting left guard first 2 games last year. They have guys that could play both of those spots. Now, you would assume that Wiley and Allegretti are probably depth, but they at least now, okay, we have somebody if everything falls apart, we don't get what we want, we at least have options. So I think they've done that. I do think Allegretti has a chance to start, but I don't think this precludes them from, if there's a center out there that they just think is a good number for them at a good value, that they would sign him. I don't think it precludes them from that either. So I wouldn't say he's the presumptive starting center, but I think he definitely has a chance, and it gives them a option to spend their money elsewhere if they prefer.
All right. I have, at the beginning of the show, I had two kind of hunches that I just shared. I didn't think either one of them was like a massive reveal, but I am, in reading through your thing, it looks like you definitely agree with me on one. The first one is, I just think, in listening to Debo last week, I don't think Debo's coming back. I think they want a different type of player at wide receiver, which Juwan Jennings, it would be my number one if they're not going to pay, say, for a Pierce as an example. But at the beginning of the show, I had two kind of, hunches that Debo's going to test the market. And the only way he would come back is if there was no market for him and they could get him back on the cheap. You say what?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Whenever you've asked me in the last week or two, name some free agents, which ones do you think will be back? I mean, I've been pretty steadfast, no Debo. Now, admittedly, part of that is I look at it like it just doesn't make any sense. Again, he had a great camp, great start to the season, showed some good stuff in the end. His production got swallowed up by the terribleness that was going on during the middle of the season. But stylistically, he just is not an outside receiver, and he could not carry that load when Terry got hurt. He doesn't give you that downfield presence. So he's a luxury more than a staple, and that they need to get something more secure there. So whether that's drafting or whether that's signing one of these free agents, you mentioned Jennings, who of course Adam Peters had a hand in drafting when he was with the 49ers, or it's using that 7th pick in the draft because they've shored up other areas. They have to get something else. So yeah, to me, Debo is gone. And I will just say that when you go back and listen, like a year ago, I asked Adam Peters about Brandon Coleman being the left tackle, and within his answer, which he said nice things about the player, he did not say he's the left tackle, which I took to mean he's not the left tackle. Then they made the trade for Tunsil. In this case, between Debo, Chris Paul, to some degree Bobby Wagner, I don't think they actually said we want them back, or they weren't talking about it as if they were going to be still part of the team. He was talking about it more of like, hey, great year. He talked about Chris Paul. He sounded like a proud dad. He was really happy for the kid. He worked hard. And I believe everything Dan Quinn said, but he didn't say, and I hope he's back next year to see where he and Tunsil can take this thing. So, I think, in the case of Debo and some of these other guys, I think if we're reading the tea leaves right there, as of now, they're probably not coming back.
And the other one I had is, it wouldn't surprise me if before we get to next week, Jacob Martin's re-signed.
Yeah, I mean, I think that one's possible. So here's the thing, right? So now they've re-signed Tress Way, Andrew Wiley, Nick Allegretti. I think the one thing
extended Allegretti, yeah.
Extended, yeah. I mean, essentially they all, got extended. But anyway, yeah. So the one common element between all three of those guys is they all wanted to stay here. They were not looking to test the market. So when you're in that mode, I'm not saying that the team tried to screw them, but you have a bit of an advantage, right? You're not having to woo them as much, and that makes the negotiation a little bit easier. Therefore, so that's different than necessarily some other people. Like I think in the case of Jacob Martin, do I think they want him back? I do. But I do think that, if they don't give him an offer that just makes it so easy for him to sign, that he will look and see what else is out there. So sure, it's possible they say, hey, we need to lock this down. Let's give him a good bump here. But I would guess he tests the market and sees what happens.
Is it becoming more and more obvious as we get closer to next week, especially, this is something you suggested a few weeks back, that the market could certainly be a lot bigger than even we anticipated it when the season ended, but that Chris Paul's definitely going to test free agency and there's going to be a lot of interest?
That seems to be the case. I mean, the guard market is actually fairly deep, but he's one of the younger guys in it. So if you want, you want that potential, that he can be a pretty attractive piece there. The range I've heard anywhere sort of from 8 to 15 million, which is obviously pretty big. But if I had to guess, I would guess north of 10. And maybe that's not a massive number. And Washington did just save money. This was what their point was about cutting Biotic, was that it saves them, the $8 million that they were going to spend on his salary. So perhaps that's in advance of saying, hey, we want to bring Chris Paul back. But like I said, my sense is that, yeah, they're going to let him test the market, and that probably means he's not coming back, would be my read on that one right now.
Talking to Ben Standig, you wrote wide receiver market expensive at the top, interesting in the middle. So let's talk about how they address wide receiver, since we both think that Debo is not going to come back. I think there's like a chance of something like a Jawan Jennings and a Wan'Dale Robinson, or just a Jawan Jennings and who knows, maybe somebody on the roster. I think Trey Burks they're going to want to re-sign, and he shouldn't be very expensive to re-sign. Ayuk's still out there. How do you see it?
Yeah, I didn't get into the Ayuk thing because that's obviously a whole other level. But just in terms of the market, I mean, like, even if they bring back Burks, like, that's a backup plan. That's depth that you can't, like, based on what we've seen, we can't say he's the starter, despite that one amazing catch. So the question is, who else are they going to bring on board? And thinking about it and then talking to people in some order, you've got, Rashid Shaheed, the burner who helped Seattle get to the Super Bowl. You got Romeo Doubs from Green Bay. He's probably the best, like, all-around route runner within this group. And then you mentioned Wan'Dale Robinson, who had a breakout year. You mentioned Jennings, who's been productive as a seventh round pick. And then Debo fits in there somewhere. I think it's just good, different strokes for different folks here. Shaheed is the take it off the top guy. Like I said, Dobbs is the route runner, and so on. I think Dobbs to me makes a lot of sense, and I think that's one where, again, how hardcore they're into that, I don't know, but I think that one is one that makes sense. So there's also Mike Evans, which to me feels like a kind of a different category just because of, who he is, and he might be going for a title at his age and those types of things. But these other guys, I think they all are pretty interesting. And from what I gather, I think Washington is looking into this tier, not definitively these guys, but I think just some of these guys at least, and looking to spend there. Alex Pierce is the top receiver. That money is going to be a whole other story. Either the Colts are probably going to franchise tag him or pay him north of 20, or some team will, and I don't see Washington getting involved in that.
One of the things that, just in looking at it more closely as we get closer to it, I think that there are more knowns offensively than defensively. There's some really good, potentials defensively. Like Trey Hendrickson is more than a potential. Like, he's a bit of a given, but he is coming off injury, and he is going to be 31, 32 years old. Offensively, there's just a lot of guys that you're like, yeah, I've watched him enough to know, if they sign him, like Jawan Jennings to me is a guy that if they sign him, not only is he a real solid player, the best blocking wide receiver in the game, probably an underrated receiver, but he fits the offense that they're getting ready to play. And the general manager obviously knows him well. And you can say that about a number of the running backs in free agency. Defensively, a little bit different. So let's move there. You wrote edge defenders. Everybody's waiting on Trey Hendrickson. So how realistic is it that Washington's going to be in the Trey Hendrickson market, which I would guess is going to go $30 million plus a year, regardless of his age and injury?
Yeah. So the key here is that we don't know if the Bengals are going to put the franchise tag on him, and that the deadline for that is tomorrow, 4:00. That's kind of what everybody's waiting on. If he's available,
but didn't they promise him last year that would be it for the tag?
No, they didn't.
Okay.
So that's still a possibility, and that's like not everybody's obviously going to be in that kind of market, but it's the top of the food chain. You're not going to look to the other names until unless you know for sure what's going to go on here. Look, I know Washington had at least a cursory interest in Hendrickson last year. He obviously would make a ton of sense in terms of what they need. You mentioned $30 million. That's going to be really interesting. He was the sack leader in the league in 2023 and 24. Then last year, a bunch of injuries, just didn't have, one of those years as we witnessed here with a lot of guys. He's, 31. He'll be, I'm not saying it's impossible for him to get that kind of money, but and also despite being that sack leader, he's not the true game wrecker the way we would look at a Myles Garrett or maybe a Max Crosby. I mean, obviously a very, very good player, but I don't know if he's going to get 30. We'll see about that. But, for Washington, it would be a very bold move. They definitely would need it. And it would be much more akin to the all-in type move that, was discussed last year. So I think it's conceivable, but I just don't know that ultimately he's going to be a guy for them. I think spreading some of that money out a little bit. And, the defensive edge market, like you said, after Hendrickson, it's not exactly loaded with obvious names, but there are a bunch of 26, 27-year-old guys like Owe from the Chargers, Boye Mafe with Seattle. I keep butchering this guy's name. Ebikede from the Falcons. He's a local kid. He went to Einstein High School. These are guys who.
Would you say high school wise?
He went to Einstein.
Oh, he did.
Okay. So these are guys who are, stylistically perfectly fit what we think Durante Jones is going to want to put out there. They're not going to cost $20 million or things like that. And, there's a lot of upside. You're taking a little bit of a risk because it's just not the same. It's not a sure thing the way we think Hendrickson would be. But, they need so many guys on the edge right now. And then, I think they maybe look to get a couple of these guys rather than just the one big one.
What do you think is going to happen with Marcus Mariota? I know we've asked and talked about him before, but your column this morning is focused on, everything that's going to happen here over the next week and then beyond. And you wrote something about Mariota. So share with everyone what that is.
Yeah, look, I've lowered I thought he was gone when the season ended. He got obviously a chance to play a bunch last year. I think that really gave him a taste for wanting to be back as a starter. And I don't think necessarily the comfort that Washington offers may be enough this time, except that, it felt like he was going to go wherever Kingsbury went. Now Kingsbury's not running any offense. Maybe he still goes to the Rams. The Rams backup with Jimmy Garoppolo. He's a free agent. And obviously I think Mariota would want to be out west. He's from Hawaii and so on. And there's a couple other jobs out there, maybe Minnesota. They want that sort of competition / veteran mentor for J.J. McCarthy. But I think also it feels pretty definitive now that Kyler Murray, Tua Tagovailoa, Kirk Cousins are all going to be free agents. And realistically, teams are most likely going to want to sign them over Mariota. So I think he's maybe getting a little bit squeezed. I haven't done the game of musical chairs to see exactly what's out there and how many spots are open for how many quarterbacks. But I still would think he's going to try to find a place where, at a minimum, he's the bridge guy versus coming here where, the only way you're going to play is if Jaden Daniels gets hurt. But we also know he's not going to close the door. He likes it here. They like him. So that part's easy. But, playing time is playing time, and that's just not going to happen here unless Daniels gets hurt.
Yeah, I think the quarterback thing, fortunately, our team's not in it, but it's actually really interesting this year. Not because there are elite guys available, but these decisions, like Arizona's going to move on from Kyler Murray, no doubt. Miami very likely going to move on from Tua. You've got a rookie quarterback in Vegas, but that makes Geno Smith, available. And by the way, people like Geno Smith last year. I think he went to the wrong team. But to your point, there are a lot of guys floating out there, and there are 6 or 7 opportunities. I mean, Malik Willis is probably going to get a 3-year deal worth $90 million or more, this offseason. Cousins is out there. Flacco's getting a lot of attention in free agency at 41 or 40 years old. Aaron Rodgers is probably going back to Pittsburgh. But if he doesn't, what happens there? The Daniel Jones injury and the Indianapolis situation. There's actually a lot of very interesting QB situations this year. And one we're not even thinking about is, what if Stafford decides to hang it up, in LA? Or what's the succession plan if you think that Stafford's entering his final season? There's a lot with the quarterback market that's interesting this year, even though it's not top tier guys. We are talking, of course, to Ben Standig, and Ben wrote this morning about a lot of the plans here for Washington in the off season. So let's get to the draft. Well, actually, one last position, and that is tight end. If I told you they don't add a tight end in free agency, would that be shocking to you?
I don't think it would be, and I, to be clear, I assume you mean like a starting tight end, not a fourth tight end, right?
Yes, of course.
So, yeah, I mean, again, you're trying to read between the lines here. When I asked Dan Quinn about the tight end situation and something about Ben Sinnott and, his fit, and Quinn talked about, he hasn't had a chance to do a ton so far. He and Zach are very different tight ends, but we want to see him do things like play in the backfield, et cetera, et cetera. And playing in the backfield, he was drafted essentially as an H-back, but Cliff Kingsbury's offense didn't have that. This new one with Blau, presumably can do that. So to me, it feels like they are open to giving Sinnott a chance here to be the guy. Look, they did draft him in the second round. It's not that he's been bad. He just hasn't been playing. And then when he did play at the end of the year, they still didn't really go to him. But again, I don't really put that on him, I don't think. So, and I also think John Bates, nobody's going to think he's Travis Kelce, but I think when, early in his career, I think he did show something as a receiver, but just was not looked at all in that mode. So again, you can't fix all your needs in one off season. You can't spend on everything all at once. So if you tell me that they stick with Sinnott and Bates, and then you've got Yankoff, and they mentioned Lawrence Cager, a practice squad guy who's like a huge human being, that he might be able to be that fourth guy. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the way they go. There are some interesting tight ends at the top of the tier. You've got a Kongwu, former Terp, played with the Titans, a younger guy. He's got some good yak in his game. David Njoku, Isaiah Likely from the Ravens. So there's some options there. But again, when you look at if they want to direct money to other areas, tight end might be a spot where they say, let's roll with this and see what happens.
Can you stick around if we take a quick break and talk about the combine and the draft, the combine winners, losers, for whatever it's worth?
I have a few minutes. I do have to hit something else in a little bit, but I got a few minutes, yes.
All right, we'll do that. More of Ben right after this. Laramie Tunsil, I guess, liked a tweet about His former teammate in Houston, Titus Howard, who was traded, also got a $63 million contract extension for 3 years. Laramie's is coming, I would assume. Better. I don't want this one going into training camp. I think it would be a bad look for Adam Peters. And, I'm not one of those that thinks there have been a bunch of bad looks so far. We've got Ben. Ben is with us for another 10 minutes. So let's just real quickly talk about the Indy Combine. I talked about the beginning of the show, just, the idea, the winners and losers. If you just go back 3 or 4 years, like it's kind of comical to see who the big winners were and who the real losers were and how those, predictions panned out. But did they lose out on Sonny Styles because of his incredible Indy Combine?
It would appear so. I heard from people that didn't think he'd get outside, that he'll get outside the top 5 now. I heard Todd McShay on his podcast, guarantee it, he's not getting past 5. That's the Giants picking there, and linebacker is a spot where they've got a pretty good defense, but linebacker is a spot for them should he be there. Who knows? The thing is, even guys like Arvell Reese and Ruben Bain and David Bailey, they're all, very interesting upside players, but I don't know that, we're not looking at next generation. We're not looking at Myles Garrett, so it's possible Styles could even jump them if a team decides that, he is such a difference maker potentially for their defense. So, yeah, I know you and I were on the same page back in week 18 when Washington won that game, and, the players are going to do what they do, but the arguments that people were making that it doesn't matter, well, we'll see in a few weeks, because it's conceivable that the top 3 edge guys and Styles are all gone. That would mean that if you want to take a stud defender, you're going to have to take probably Caleb Downs, which is not a bad player, but it's a safety, and he doesn't blow you away. He didn't blow anybody away with his sort of measurables and athleticism. So, not saying that would be a bad pick. I'm just saying if you're picking at 5, you're getting one of those other guys no matter what. Now you're going to have to hope a little bit.
So it was, I tried to figure it out earlier because I had forgotten. It was 2 spots. That last win against Philadelphia was the difference between picking 5th and picking 7th, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Styles, Bain, Bailey, and Reese could all be gone, but that would leave Downs. And personally, I think he might be the best football player in the draft. I think you can make that case. But if you want to give me just your overall takeaway from Indy Combine outside of the noise that Styles made, what else? What were I saw the Carnell Tate 40 time, the Bain hands we talked about last week. What else stood out to you?
Yeah, between those 2 that you just mentioned, and Downs did not, his measurables, his arm length, things like that were also not particularly impressive. So, again, 3 guys at Washington may be staring at 7, at least to some degree, come out of the combine with more questions than answers. But the teams might be laughing at all of us for saying such things. I texted one scouting director the tweet about Caleb Downs and people questioning him now, and he basically he sent back an LOL emoji, whatever. Right. I'm good. And I've heard the same things about Tate. Go ahead, pass on him if you want. That's fine. This obviously was an incredibly fast track. it was arguably, or maybe officially, the fastest 40 times collectively at a combine, which does make Tate's 4.53 little questionable there. But again, a hell of a player, no doubt. I think the other thing is, in asking people, okay, well, what do you think about this guy? What does Washington do at 7? Blah, blah, blah. The one consistent mention was that there may be only 10, 11 guys that most people will view as a first-round pick. Not that they won't get picked in the first round, but the individual grade that a team or an analyst would provide, that there may be only 10 or 11 of those guys in this draft. There's typically not 32, to be clear, even though obviously there are 32 picks, but 10 or 11 is a pretty low. Small amount. And that also factors in perhaps to the idea of trading down. It may not matter. And again, that's the 10 or 11 may not be the same 10 or 11 for every team. But if you're trading down and that 10 or 11 is a real thing, now all of a sudden maybe you're not getting that top shelf prospect that you do at 7, especially for defense. That could be a significant decision for Washington to make, considering their struggles there. So, yeah, I mean, I think the speeds made everybody feel a lot better about this draft class, but in general, at the top at least, it's not a draft class that people are like overly excited about.
What did people think of the tight end from Oregon, Kenyon Sadiq, after Indy?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have the comparables, but like when you saw like he's heavier than this guy, faster than that guy, jumps higher than this guy, like all the different like stars at different positions, it's just insane. Look, I think the question here is going to be, what do you think of the player? Just because you're an Adonis doesn't mean you're somebody that a team's going to trust play in and play out. And I do think there's a little inconsistency there, but the athletic freakiness, and this is a draft where there are some other tight ends, but he might be the only one picked in the first 2 rounds. Maybe there's a couple of guys, but like he's the definitive first round guy. Nobody else, as it stands, is going in the first round, and he's probably going top 15, I would say. And look, tight ends to me are just, if you find one that is really good as a difference maker, the way we saw last year with the Bears getting Colston Loveland and the Colts getting Tyler Warren, I just think that gives you such an advantage. So I could see a team in that top 10, 12, 13 picks saying let's do this, because he is unique, athletically he's gifted, and there's, like I said, there's no really up plan B if you want a tight end in the first round.
All right, your next mock, will down still be the pick? Because that's what it was at 3.0. Is that what your guess is right now?
I don't know.
You had Styles going at 10.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, after this, again, it's also stupid. Like again, just because you run the 40 at whatever speed, it doesn't really matter. There's so much else that goes on. Like the interviews, you can say whatever you want about Caleb Downs. He crushed the interviews. I was really impressed with his podium session, and you heard the same thing about other guys as well. So he's certainly there. I guess now we're getting to the point with free agency where I may start thinking, okay, I think they may do this in free agency, ergo this pick makes sense. And I will just say that, and we talked about this before, there is a world to me where it makes the most sense to invest on offense, and for defense, build up the base, but like build around the offense for 2026 purposes. If you want to ricochet back to the playoffs, getting help around Jaden Daniels is the best way to do it. And if that's the case, are we going to look past Jeremiah Love, who's not also crushed the combine? He's, for some people, the best player in the draft, or top 2 or 3, and it's only the running back situation from a value perspective that knocks him down. And for Washington, while I don't love taking a running back, he's also such a great pass catcher that even if you don't get, one of those top receivers we were talking about, now you at least have that, higher end passing down back that would be a huge deal. Not to mention, good luck with Jaden Daniels if you do read option or things like that. So I'm not saying I'm going that route, but I can't dismiss it either.
All right, last one, subject to change on Friday and then a week from today. Give me the one free agent you think they'll sign. You're most confident about.
Their own or somebody from the outside?
I'm sorry?
Their own.
No, somebody from the outside. My fault. Somebody from the outside.
I mean, I don't know. Confidence is a relative thing, but just to play along here, give me Ebikete, the edge linebacker from the Falcons. I just don't think he's going to cost a ton of money. I do think they have some interest in him. I don't care so much about the local ties, but there's that too. And they need flat out. They just need more speed on defense. They need guys who can put their hand down, can play up in this new defense. So I don't know. I'll go with one of those edge guys, and I'll go with Ebikete from the Falcons.
Yes, the Falcons' defense was pretty damn good this year. He ended up with 2 sacks in his 4th year off the rookie year, but he had 6 in each of the last 2 years. And as you mentioned, he was a Montgomery County kid who went to Penn State. All right, thanks.
His pressure rate, according to Next Gen Stats, his pressure rate was like over 16, which based on looking at Washington, only Bobby Wagner and Dorrance Armstrong had a better pressure rate than him. So automatically, if he shows up, that you would think that their pass rush would be improved. And again, I just don't think that he's going to cost nearly as much as some other guys.
Talk to you later. Thanks for doing this.
Yeah, man.
Ben Standig, everybody. I want to tell you about Window Nation. It's been a long winter, but don't relax just yet. It's snowing out there right now. Although Max says it's not snowing where he is. It is
Out in
snowing
Southeast,
where I
it's
am.
not.
Is it snowing yet?
No, still haven't
Yeah.
seen it's
It's
not
coming down
nary a flake.
decently here in Bethesda. But early spring weather, which we're going to get later on this week, it can be fleeting. It can be unpredictable. And there are some long range. It says we return to the cold mid-March. Adjusting your thermostat can be a guessing game unless you've got the right windows this time of year. New windows from Window Nation are customizable and energy efficient, which guarantees a comfortable home during the ups and downs of the weather in March. Window Nation's expert installers take just 1 day to install your windows, and the windows are backed by a lifetime warranty. During this month, Window Nation is offering up to 50% off on all window styles, and they've got over 1,500 window styles and colors available. All I ask is give Window Nation a free shot with a free in-home estimate scheduled when it's convenient for you. Call them at 866-90-NATION or head to windownation.com. When we come back, there is a football coach on the hot seat, and it's truly hot. I'll explain when we return. Kevin Sheehan Show, the Team 980 and the team980.com.
All right, happy Monday, everybody. We start off with the news out of Ashburn, Washington. They have reached a 2-year extension with guard Nick Allegretti. Plus, the Texans, they have traded a 4th-round pick, 7th-round pick, and offensive lineman Juice Scruggs to the Lions in exchange for running back David Montgomery, set to replace Joe Mixon in that role. Plus, the Colts, news reported this weekend that they are set to tag Alec Pierce, along another top wide receiver candidate comes off the market. Plus, the Chiefs, they plan to release Juwan Taylor, saving $20 million in cap space. Plus, tonight, we've got the Wizards set to take on the Houston Rockets. That'll be over on 106.7 The Fan. Pregame coverage gets rolling at 6:45. This update is sponsored by the Team 980 YouTube page. Just open the app, type of the Team 980, hit subscribe. Kevin Sheehan is live every day from 10 to 1, and you can catch programs like Take Command all off season. Don't forget to hit the like button whenever you do decide to join us and turn on notifications to stay up to date on all things DC sports. And that is what's trending.
There's a coach on the hot seat in town, a football coach, and it's not who you think it is. More on that coming up. Interesting weekend from college basketball, Max. Duke absolutely blew out Virginia on Saturday at Cameron Indoor. And Duke is now clearly the best defensive team in the country and maybe the best defensive team we've seen in a long time from Duke in particular. They've won 6 in a row, and literally nobody's been able to score against them. Virginia had won 9 in a row. And by the way, this is not a Tony Bennett Virginia team. I mean, they were averaging 85 points a game during their win streak before losing to Duke 77-51. But Duke has held during their win streak, recent win streak, after they kind of blew a lead and lost to North Carolina in Chapel Hill. Saturday night, was that before the Super Bowl or after it? I forget now. But they held Clemson, the 20th ranked team in the country, to 54, Syracuse to 64, Michigan to 63, Notre Dame to 56, and Virginia to 51. Duke is by far and away the number one Ken Pomeroy adjusted defensive team rating-wise in the country. They're number 6 in overall offense. They are the number 1 team in the overall net rating as well, slightly ahead of the team they beat a week ago Saturday, Michigan. But Duke is rolling. This is a really good Duke basketball team, especially on defense. The other team that's really rolling, and they had a 34-point win on Saturday night in Gainesville against John Calipari's 20th ranked Arkansas team. They beat them 111-77, the defending champion Florida Gators did. And Todd Golden's team is absolutely rolling right now. That's 9 wins in a row. Listen to the margin of victory in these games. They beat South Carolina by 37. They beat Alabama by 23. They beat A&M by 19, Georgia by 20. Kentucky was the closest game they had. They won by 9. They beat South Carolina by 14, Ole Miss by 19, Texas by 13, and Arkansas the other night by 34 points. Florida climbing the rankings very quickly and becoming, if you didn't know it before, a legitimate team to defend its national championship from last year. Look out for Florida right now. Look out for Duke 100%. Michigan lost a key backup to an ACL injury on Friday night in their blowout win over Illinois, which I was a bit surprised at. Illinois has been a really good team this year and a really good scoring team, but they had no chance against Michigan. They've now lost, I think, 4 out of their last 6, and I thought this might be one of his better teams at Illinois. The Big Ten right now, other than Michigan, Purdue lost again yesterday. They lost on the road against Ohio State, fought their way back into the tournament picture. But I'm telling you, I don't know if anybody's playing better than Duke in Florida right now. Duke in Florida, 2 legitimate national championship possibilities. Florida's ranked 7th, but in Ken Pom, they're 4th currently, and they are the 4th best defensive team. It's really interesting that the best teams in the country per Ken Pom's advanced numbers are the 4 best defensive teams in the country. Duke 1, Michigan 2, Arizona 3, and Florida 4. The best offensive team is Illinois, and they had no shot against Michigan, who just put the clamps on them. It's funny how we're seeing defense become, in sports, have a bit of a resurgence. Defense in the NFL for sure, defense to a certain degree in college football, and defense right now in college basketball. Even though you see some big scores, defense is going to win this tournament coming up in March, and it's been historically the teams that can score that go the furthest. That formula might be changing. We'll see. So ESPN's Adam Rittenberg, who covers college football, put out this morning the way too early college football coaching hot seat tiers for 2026. And the hottest of the hot is tier number 1. And on that list is Mike Norvell at Florida State, Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, Dave Aranda at Baylor, and then the fourth coach on that list, Mike Locksley at Maryland. Here's what Mike Locksley, has done at Maryland. If you don't know this, some of you know this. You Terp fans certainly know what Locksley's record is and how poor it is at Maryland. But let me just first read to you what Rittenberg wrote. He wrote, Locksley's ability to recruit and build a roster is undeniable, which is 100% true. He is as good a recruiter. When you consider that Maryland's got to be at the bottom of the bottom for Power Four conferences, when you take the Power Four conferences, you tell me a program where there's less interest from a fan base than at Maryland. You can't even say places like Vanderbilt anymore. With Diego Pavia last year, they were selling out every game. And Vanderbilt's always done pretty well even when they haven't had good teams. Locksley has done a phenomenal job when you consider that who would want to go play football at Maryland? Have you been to a game there in College Park? Literally, there are basically attendees dressed as empty seats throughout. You can get, for a 12 o'clock game, you can get your own row, let alone a seat. And yet he keeps recruiting to this. He is, from an EQ standpoint, he's way up there, man. From a leadership, communication standpoint, Locksley's tough to touch. I mean, he recruited the number 2 overall player in the country to come to Maryland next year, defensive end Zion Ely, all right, from Baltimore. Number 2 player in the country. He consistently puts players into the NFL. But the problem isn't, as Doc would say, Mondays through Fridays. The problem, or Sundays through Fridays, the problem for Locksley have been Saturdays. Saturdays have been the problem because the record has been really, really poor. Overall, since coming to Maryland, he is 37-49, 12 games under 500 overall, and an absolute horrendous 17-48 in the Big Ten. 17-48. He's yet to have a season in which he had a winning record in conference. Not good, as Steve Spurrier would say. He can recruit, he can communicate, he can lead, and he is a great mentor to a lot of young men at that age. And he puts players into the NFL, and he develops young men. He just struggles on Saturdays. And unfortunately, when you're talking about revenue generation for the university and for the athletic department, you need to win more on Saturdays. So it totally makes sense that he would be on the hottest of seats, according to Adam Rittenberg at ESPN.com. Luke Fickell's tenure is not going to last very long in Wisconsin if they don't get it done, for sure. But yes, this is not a shocker. I think it's a shocker to some that new athletic director Jim Smith, after this past 4-8 season, which started 4-0, ended with 8 straight losses, that there wasn't anybody that would help buy that contract out. But I know that Mike is certainly respected, well-liked, and everybody who's a Maryland fan would love to see him finally figure it out. Because, look, the bottom line is, even though the record is what it is, they went to bowl games with a losing Big Ten record. But in 2021, 7-6, they won the Pinstripe Bowl. 2022, 8-5 overall, won the Charlotte Bowl, the Duke's Mayo Bowl. And in 2023, 8 wins again and won the Music City Bowl. Now, they had a quarterback in Lia Tungavailoa. They had a quarterback, and they have not had a quarterback the last 2 years, where they've gone 4-8 and then 1-8 in the Big Ten, followed by 4-8 and 1-8 again. Yeah. So there you go. He's on the hottest of seats. Interesting that he puts on retirement watch Bill Belichick. We did think that there was a chance between the end of the season and the NFL coaching carousel, that Belichick might leave Carolina, but he's not. He's back for a second straight year in Chapel Hill. And at 74 years old, 73, 74, whatever he is, would anybody be surprised if he turns it around a little bit? I wouldn't. 1 year, bumpy year, that team actually got better as the season went along. If you kind of lost interest in Bill Belichick last year when they started out off like 1-5 or whatever it was, they won some games. They were really close to winning a few more down the stretch, but still finished 4-8 overall in his first year as a college coach. Bill Belichick 4-8, but back for this year. A relatively, I thought, eventless kind of weekend, with the exception of golf. Did you watch what Shane Lowry did on the final 2 holes yesterday, or final 2 out of the final 3 holes yesterday, Max? You did not. At the tournament at the Palm Beaches in Florida, Shane Lowry had a 3-shot lead on 16 tee box. He went double bogey on 16 and 17 and lost to Nico Echevarria. That was Shane Lowry, who's been a big-time clutch player, certainly in international competitions, Ryder Cup, etc. Totally collapsed down the stretch, and nobody saw that coming. Sands was on the call, all the guys, Hicks, all the guys from NBC, and no one saw that coming, and he literally hit into the water on 16, and on the par 3 17th, chunked, sliced one into the water at 17, double bogey, to lose in 18. Didn't even go to a playoff hole. 3-shot lead at 16, lost the tournament ultimately to Echevarria. That may have been the most exciting event of the weekend. All right, done for the day. Back tomorrow. Chris is next.